quiet on set.
Tape rolling. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Clint's SharePoint Netcast number, let me scroll through my notes, 148.
Yay!
So this one was recorded live Monday, March 4th, still not President's Day. I need to take that out of my notes. 2013. What's cool about this one, Shane? What is different?
I'm here?
Well, you've been here before.
We're in San Francisco.
We've done one in San Francisco before.
We've got a live studio audience.
We have a live studio audience. So I would move the cameras and show the live studio. Yeah, but feel free to clap and make it sound like there's more of you there than there is. Woo! It does sound like there's way more. So we actually pulled this off. We got a live studio audience for the first time. We did this in San Francisco one other time, and no one showed up except the cleaning guy with the vacuum cleaner. So that was awesome.
The good news is that the vacuum cleaner guy's already been by, so I think we're good tonight.
Yeah, we're probably in good shape. So we're at SPTechCon. I wanted to give a personal shout out to the folks at SPTechCon that made this whole thing possible, Dave and Stacy and Katie. I came to them a couple months ago and said that I was going to do this and said, hey, can you give me a room and make some space? And they said, yeah, they hooked us up. So that was really nice of them. So this is all possible. If you see, for those of you who are here, if you see Dave or Katie or Stacy walking around, tell them thanks, tell them how great this was, tell them how great the conference is. So talking to them, and then also the folks at Rackspace, got to thank them for all the equipment, all that. I know it doesn't seem right without my flag hanging behind.
I know,
but I'm rocking the Rackspace shirt here.
Well, I got the new Rackspace T-shirt.
So get that up there.
I can never remember which one of the cameras I want to show.
Yeah, you're on all of them. So if for those of you that are at the conference, you can go down to the Rackspace booth, booth 105.
Yes.
If you go in straight down, it's the last one on the left. You can get yourself a shirt, and while you're there getting a shirt, what else can you get?
So guys and girls,
you guys,
you're the first to see it live.
This is an intimate moment for us.
But this is, you remember back in the SharePoint 911 day, we had the cow and the pig
and the horse, the donkey.
The donkey. Number 5 is a cow, is a bull.
A bull, yes.
Strong like bulls.
Yes, you've never been described like that. So these are not out on display at the Rackspace booth. You got to know to ask for one.
You have to make a bull-like sound.
You have to so you can stomp your feet. Yeah, you can poop on the floor, whatever. You got to do something like a bull.
This little horning.
Yep, you can do that. But they will be secret. Yeah. Oh, so we got a longhorn. Yes, we got Jason in the back. Yep, we got you can do the longhorn thing. That works as well. I hadn't thought about that. So yeah, this is the next in the farm animal trilogy or quintilogy
Number
or
5.
Whatever 5 things in a row is. So that's awesome. We got that working. And what else are we going to be giving away in the booth this week?
Did my T-shirt?
Hugs from Shane, always free at the Rackspace booth. Booth 105 on the left. Hugs from this guy.
Jason. Oh, look at him. He's coming.
He's going to come up and get one.
I don't know if you're out on stage. Where's the bouncers? Oh, thank you. No, so more. That was the most awkward hug I've ever had.
That's awesome.
I don't mean to say, but kind of touch.
Did he? Normally you charge for that.
Yeah.
He did.
So even cooler is, Todd, what did you turn in last night at midnight? 2 months and 3 days late.
Was it really that late?
Yes.
So you guys have heard me whining about this SharePoint 2013 admin book that they've been writing and I've been procrastinating. I actually finished my last chapter last night before I went to bed, and so the last chapter is in. Now that in no way, shape, or form means the work is done. For those of you that have ever written books, it just means the first nightmare is over. There are several more nightmares to go. Author reviews and PDF reviews and all that kind of crap. But the last chapter is in. And so part of our marketing is we've got one of the chapters that was written much sooner than mine. We're going to be giving away down at the booth Wednesday at 1.
Yes,
Wednesday at 1.
So we're going to sign a bunch of pieces of paper for you.
A bunch of pieces of paper. So when I heard they were going to have a chapter, I was expecting like this little thinly bound thing, and I'm like, did you guys just go to Kinko's? But
look at that, the first autograph.
So this is chapter 15. It's on the Office web apps.
Yep.
Shane wrote it.
Here, we'll distribute one. Look at this. I'm giving out.
Chris Beckett is the proud owner of the very first signed copy of Professional SharePoint 2013 Administration. So that's going to be going on. So there's a lot of free stuff at the Rackspace booth. We got a really cool tent. It's kind of cool. I don't know. I didn't have to help put it up this time, so I.
And you didn't see the cornhole boards, did you?
I did. Oh, that's right. We have cornhole boards.
Yes.
For those of you that are appalled by this, we promise you it's nothing unsavory. That's a thing that they play at mostly college games, I guess. The slanted piece of plywood with a hole in it, you throw bags with corn in it, and it's way more family friendly than it sounds.
It is. Reminds me of a speaker gift I got once.
Yeah. So are they just playing that? Are they playing for prizes?
Yeah. So if you get a ringer, I think you can win some different stuff. Who knows? It's the marketing folks, ran wild with that one. So
as long as we got our bowls, I don't care what else they do.
This was really what I wanted, folks. This right here.
And this has been several conferences in the making. So we've been part of Rackspace now for a little over a year. So think of all the conferences that we've been at. We've wanted to do animals at every conference, and it's never quite worked out until this one. So those are hard fighting. I'm going to keep this one. That was mine.
Aww.
So we got that going. So if you're at the conference, those of you in the audience, swing by, say, hey, we're going to be around. We got all that. So that's the first of many Rackspace plugs.
It is.
So the next part of the show is always the production notes, or the part where I tell about all the things I did wrong the last time, which is usually a big part of quiet in the audience there. Come on, this is a professional gig. What? Yeah, come on. So last week, one of the things that I've added here in the last couple of months is putting things on YouTube. And that's I got that up pretty quick. Publishing on YouTube, if you guys haven't ever published videos on YouTube, it's pretty easy. It's really easy. And the interface and the analytics and all the management stuff is awesome. And so it's really easy to get things up there. So that video's up there. All the files have been uploaded, and if you've got the RSS feeds, they're all live. But I forgot to do the blog post that have all the links in it. So 147 is done, but I've got the blog post. If you do ever wonder about that, because I'm horrible about those things, on the Netcast page, well, not the one that Shane's got up on the screen, but the front page, on the right there's a link that says Netcast download directory, and that's just the raw files. So even if I forget to update the RSS or whatever, they're all in there. So I'll get that out here in the next couple of days, as long as with them. All right, so now on to some topics. Did you have a couple of things, or we got?
Let's see. So we did that one.
We did that one.
We did that one. We did that one.
Okay.
So the only other one I wanted to point out.
Let's do it.
Is my fabulous new friend. So
yep.
I'm sure you're all cool with me, so you've known about them for quite a bit of time. But it is the Fitbit. How many of you, anybody got a Fitbit in here? Anyone?
You've heard of them?
There's one.
Yep.
So I am a huge fan of this. Been dragging Todd all around San Francisco.
And dragging is true. I don't know if you guys have heard, and we get out. I consider myself a fairly worldly individual. San Francisco's really freaking hilly.
Straight up hills.
I mean, there are sidewalks so steep that they have ladders built into them. It's horrible. And so this guy's like, hey, we need to do 9,000 steps or something today. So off we go. And you can't go any direction without climbing a wall in this town.
Yeah.
It was...
I don't know what we're going to do tomorrow. So our goal tomorrow... So we got...
His goal tomorrow.
And by mine, I mean our. So we did about 15,500 steps so far today. We'll get a few more in, but my goal for tomorrow is 25,000. So I plan on killing Todd Clint, going up the hill, down.
So my suggestion is we just walked around the block because it's only flat. But so we wanted to walk to the water because we're in downtown San Francisco right now. We're not too far from the water, or at least when you look at it, it doesn't look too far.
Yeah.
But everywhere as we got closer and closer to the water, we kept going downhill, which was cool until we realized that meant after we got to the water, then it was all uphill to get back. And so a few blocks away, we got our losses.
Yeah, it's really an optical illusion, right? You're way up there on top. We got to the very tip top and looking down like, oh man, the water's right there.
I can almost touch it.
So we walked about 10 blocks towards it, like, wow, the water's still right there.
Farther away.
We saw Alcatraz. That was the
Alcatraz.
first time I'd seen Alcatraz, so that was kind of cool.
Yep, we could see the Bay Bridge. Golden Gate Bridge is kind of around the corner there, but it was pretty cool. So he's got the Fitbit. There's a bunch of folks at Rackspace that have those, and they got the competition thing going on. So part of our walking thing today was to go to Target to get me one. And the guy at Target's like, yeah, every other Target in the world has one except for this one. And you're right, it would be great if we had them, but we don't. So that kind of sucked.
What do you do?
So hopefully tomorrow, before we start our death march, I'll be able to get me a Fitbit.
So anyway, I don't want to derail anything else.
No.
But that was my last note. I'm a big fan. I lost 5 pounds in the first week just from walking a few extra steps. And let's face it, we can all afford.
We speak for you. I'm on the eucalyptus diet.
Oh, that's right. Typical fat American.
Yeah. So for those of you that are watching the recording and are at home, we just got done with the lightning talks thing. We had to talk about koalas and eating eucalyptus and
elastic waistbands
and all that. Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. That's we will look into that. So some of our other topics, the SharePoint, the whole thing that we actually came here for today.
SharePoint.
We had a couple of things that have come up, and I've gotten an email, and I apologize. You guys have emailed me a couple of things that I haven't gotten into the notes yet, simply because I was doing this and trying to get this whole thing set up. And
he's blaming me.
Walking 10,000 steps with
15,563
Goofy over here. But these are a couple things that we've talked about in the past. People have submitted an email to me, so I want to throw those out there. The first one was one that Jared Matt Foss is one of the guys. He's in the chat room all the time. Met him at the SharePoint conference. He submitted a thing a while back, and this is a bug with one of the, and you're all sitting down, which is good. Jason, don't fall off your table. This was a bug with one of the cumulative updates. I know, a bug with the cumulative update. So there were some bugs with that. I got a link to his blog post, but it was a bug with the people picker, trying to find people. And I think, and I read this when he sent it to me, but I didn't read it again today. But it had to do with the August 2012 CU. Mm-hmm. And so I guess you read it while I was setting things up.
Yeah, you gave me homework. Yeah, so I mean, really, it was slow. It was taking him 30 to 90 seconds to resolve with a people picker. And so with the update, there's a new web app property that you can set. And so he has the PowerShell available here to set that. Or if you can't install the update, which has the PowerShell capabilities added to it, then he talks about some different things you can do.
Okay. So the people picker is one of those things that it's wildly not understood.
Yeah.
So when you try to resolve a name inside of SharePoint, where the hell does SharePoint come up with these names? And there's a bunch of different places. You've got the user list for the site collection.
Yep.
You've got the user profile list. You've got the people picker settings, whether it goes to your domain, or I mean, there's all kinds of ways that list gets built. And every time a new version of SharePoint comes out, I keep meaning to bolt into that and figure out that order, and I've never done it because it gets twisted around. I get chasing my tail and all that. Yeah. So blog posts like this one are good because they demystify some of that whole lookup thing.
Yeah, I think the biggest confusion for most people is the fact that the people picker and the profile database have nothing to do with each other. That just blows people's mind that they are two different worlds, and I think that's where a lot of the confusion starts.
Yeah, and the way that ended up, because it makes no sense. Why would you have this gigantic lumbering engine that pulls and gets user information and then not use it when you're looking for users? That makes no sense. But the reason is thinking about how we've got SharePoint Foundation, which doesn't have the user profile service,
right,
but does have the people picker. And then we've got SharePoint Server that does have the user profile service and has the people picker. So in order for the Foundation one to work, it has to not be reliant on the profile service because it might not be there, or won't be there in profile or in Foundation. So that's how we get some of these weird things. We get users stored in this database and in the site collections and all that.
This is why people have drinking problems.
And why you and I have jobs.
True that.
So yeah, if you're using the people picker and you've got the August 2012 CU, the bad news is you can't slipstream anymore, but the good news is you've got these buttons you can play with. And this kind of works into another thing that we were talking about today. Shane and I did our install session this morning. And how many people? There's a few folks here that were in the install session. One of the things that we've been railing on is you got to get comfortable with PowerShell. You don't need to be a PowerShell expert, but you need to understand how things work well enough to be comfortable with it. Like you need to be able to look at that script on Jared's blog and walk through it and understand what's going on. And that blog post is a great example that so many little things are getting into PowerShell only. So you have to know how to do PowerShell because there are some things you'll just never be able to do in the interface, and that's one of them. And so that's why we've been talking about that. So hopefully we've saved some people some headaches.
I think we said it best, right? If you plan on working with Microsoft products for the next 5 years, then you got to learn PowerShell. It's plain and simple, really.
Yeah, we had my wife's Skyping me and telling me that I'm out of frame. That's awesome.
Oh, is Jill watching?
She is. Look at it right there.
Oh, Jill. Todd's life loves me.
So
in case you're wondering.
That gets fixed by that. There we go. Much better.
I wish we could Skype her in right now.
Thanks. She's Skype side. Anyway, so when we did the lightning talk, we had 5 minutes and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that we were going to talk about was one of the things you should do is learn PowerShell. But if you choose not to learn PowerShell, you should play Powerball because in a couple of years you're not going to be able to do your job because you're just going to need it for everything. Every product's working towards it. There's all these things that you can only do in PowerShell. It's just the way that it's going.
Yeah.
So And so another topic, and this was another one that somebody submitted, and I can't remember if it was the guy that wrote it that submitted it or somebody who found it and it fixed the problem. But he had a problem with SharePoint 2013 search not showing any results. And what it turned out was they had moved their index location, and when they moved it, the search service didn't have permission to the new location. So when somebody would do a query, it couldn't get to the index file to check for the query. So Shane and I feel pretty strongly that you should always move your index files and all that kind of stuff off of your C drive. They should be on a separate drive. If you didn't do that when you installed the product, you should do it down the road. But then you get some of these permission issues like this one. So I think initially, yeah, so in this one, he kind of has the how you go in manually and set all the stuff. So he's got, the worker process group, needs permission to this directory, and here's all the things and all that. And we talked about this during the show last week, and Spence Harbar was in the chat room at the time, and he also suggested that you could use the initialize SP resource security commandlet. Once again, something you can only do in PowerShell. Run the initialize SP resource security commandlet, and it will walk through all of the things that SharePoint needs access to and make sure that all the users in SharePoint have access to it. Now, so for those of you, in the install session this morning, we talked about how you cannot run the wizard to set up SharePoint at the beginning. You don't want to use it to create the farm, and you can either create the farm and then run the wizard, or you can completely replace the wizard with PowerShell. Mm-hmm. We talked about how the wizard has so many steps, So one of the steps that the wizard does, one of those tasks, 1 of 8, 1 of whatever, is this step. And so every time you run a patch, it does this step. So if you want to do it all with PowerShell, you can replace with that. Now, Brian LaLance in the chat room, who's the guy that wrote the Auto SP installer and some other things, he said he tried that and it didn't work. Oh. So interesting on that. He's Canadian. He might have just done it wrong. I don't know. Oh. Could go either way.
It's the whole their head separates.
Yeah, it's really, when you're talking to them, it's very unnerving. And we actually end up having a bunch of Canadians in the chat room. So
we have one in the studio audience.
Yeah. Oh, two. Oh,
it's an epidemic.
Goodness. Is it contagious?
I got a shot for it. I think. Is that my cootie shot? Circle, dot, dot.
I think mine. So, but that's one of those things. Read that if you're having those problems. But again, it is a best practice to get as many things off of the C drive as you can: index files, ULS logs, all that kind of stuff. And if you have those problems, that blog post talks about it. Speaking of permissions, and this is one, if you can find the link, rock on. If you can't, no big deal. One of the new things in SharePoint 2013 is this social feed, where you can go see, you can follow people, and people can follow you, and you can follow keywords and all that kind of stuff. But one of the links inside of there is view all feeds. So you can just click it and see what everyone's doing. Out of the box, that doesn't work. So out of the box, if you do a regular install of SharePoint, you can follow people, you can see when people talk to you, but when you click the everyone thing, you get an error. The reason for that is you need to give, it ends up being a permissions thing, and the fix for it is to give your service app account permission to the user profile service, if I remember that fix correctly. So it ends up being a permission thing. The service account can't walk through, can't read all the stuff. So I apologize, I should have had that link, and I didn't have that handy. But the easy thing to do is go to your SharePoint 2013, go to your Newsfeed. So if you've got your My Site set up, it's going to be under Newsfeed. Click everyone. If you get a nasty error, that's what it is. It's a permission issue. And that's something I've had to fix on all the VMs that I've made.
Man, you got a bunch of these.
Yeah, so because I've been working on this chapter for a book, and I needed all the stuff with the upgrade. I've been slaving night and day on this chapter.
2 months, 3 days.
Oh, if I'd have turned it in 4 days earlier. And it's great. So in this chapter, thing's been killing me. But the publisher actually has the booth right across from us. So I was walking down and I saw the Wiley booth. I'm like, oh, thank God I turned that in last night, because one of the women that's been yelling at me was at that booth. So it was.
I was hoping she would hit you.
Well, and she
physically strike you.
And if she did, let's be honest, I've got it coming. So I wouldn't even try to block. I would just take it. That's.
It's like the slap bet.
Exactly like the slap bet. So this next one is, I'm kind of excited to talk about this one. One of the things that Shane and I don't know if we've mentioned it, we've been kind of coy about it, we're kind of into PowerShell. And one of the things that we talk about at the install session and all that is creating the search service app with PowerShell. So if you do that in 2013, you can create search without all the database GUIDs and all that. It's a much cleaner situation. So it's kind of come up now and then, but it really got hot a couple of weeks ago. People asking how you can create the SharePoint Foundation search service in PowerShell. Because up till a couple of weeks ago, the only way that anybody knew how to do it was with the wizard. The wizard we tell people never to run, that farm configuration wizard. Nobody could figure out how to create the search service application in Foundation without that wizard. It wasn't up in the new thing, you couldn't do it. If you tried to use the PowerShell you use for server, it gave you this nonsense error that didn't make any sense. So, and Callahan, she's written a bunch of the SharePoint Foundation stuff for 2010 and 2007. So she really latched onto that. She's kind of like a bulldog, and she was pestering some people on the product team, and she was on the hammer, just giving them hell up one side and down the other. And so Spence was in the chat room last week, and he's like, yeah, you can't do it. Turns out it was kind of an artificial limitation of the product. Foundation's free. Microsoft wanted to limit some of the stuff you got for free, and they kind of accidentally took out this bit where you could create it with PowerShell. So we had these discussions, and I think maybe Brian, some other folks were talking about who could figure this out. We're like, we know a guy, Gary Lapointe. He's dabbled a bit into PowerShell arts. Let's see if we can do it. So we got a hold of Gary, and we're like, hey, here's this thing. Nobody can figure out how to do it in PowerShell. What do you think? And so Gary stayed up night and day, used reflection, whatever that is. I think it involves like candles and stuff like that.
I thought it was mirrors and vampires.
That's something like that. But what he figured out was he found the spot in the object model where it was blocked, and he figured out a way around it. And so he blogged how to create a search service application in SharePoint Foundation. So he basically took the script that's on my blog that I stole from Spence and then jiggled the bits that made it work for Foundation. So in the chat room, we linked it. It's on blog.falchionconsulting.com. You should already be going there anyway if you're not. But thanks to Gary. Gary's a really smart guy, very helpful. So for those of you that are using SharePoint Foundation, you can now script that install. Yeah. So Brian's like, really, it took him 34 minutes, which is probably true.
Well, that's like your night and day for the book. You spent about 34 minutes on it. It's the current translation.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, Gary's a good guy.
Yeah.
Very smart, very good looking. You know, it works out. So.
Yeah, and it's another one of those things. With PowerShell, you have access to all these things in the background, and
all these developer things that none of us really want to be able to touch.
I feel a little dirty. I kind of lose a little respect for myself when I get in there. No. Yeah, we've already got one guy in the audience who's going to have to shower. So that was a good one. So thanks to Gary for that one. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is both Shane and I, as consultants, have worked with customers that are really high security. We've got some horror stories about trying to use SharePoint 2007 and 2010 on environments that don't have internet access and stuff like that. There's a lot of tough things. So I've talked before, one of the prereqs in SharePoint 2013, you can't install if you're not on the internet. It goes out and looks for a certificate revocation list that obviously is on the internet. There's supposedly some craziness that makes it work, but it requires installing like an XP driver. It's horrible. So as far as I know, you have to have a SharePoint server on the internet for at least that part. So now there's a Windows patch that came out that slides some stuff in that also forces a reference to that CRL, the certificate revocation list, that won't install if your SharePoint server is not on the internet.
Okay.
So, but that one is a Windows update type thing. So you got to be careful about that. So Shane and I's guidance on that is that you don't want to have your SharePoint servers getting Windows updates automatically. We could talk the rest of the night about SharePoint farms that have been taken down by that, starting way back in the SharePoint 2003 days and forward. So what you don't want is automatic patches. What you do want is to have, if you like WSUS or something, have a test environment, test these things, try them out. The good news is, unlike SharePoint patches, most Windows patches can be uninstalled, so you can get yourself out of it that way. But be careful. That one is KB2677070.
It's been, a couple weeks since somebody's environment's been torn down by a Windows update, so we're kind of overdue.
Yeah, really. It's we're 4 days into the month now, and
patches come out tomorrow, I think.
Patch Tuesday, the first Tuesday of the month. Patches come out so frequently now, I've lost track of when patches are supposed to come out.
So your blog will go down probably sometime tomorrow.
I'm out of town, so why not, right?
That's the rule.
So this was another interesting one that I saw. I think this was on Twitter, but SharePoint Ben put this one out. He's got a test environment. He's a developer. I mean, it can't be perfect,
Not
right?
passing judgment.
Yes. So he's got a SharePoint 2010 server, but he installed Office 2013 on it, and I don't think there's really any surprised faces when we found out that killed SharePoint. So SharePoint 2010 server, Office 2013 client, not a good match. Don't do that. And again, he's a developer. It was a VM. He didn't take down his company site or anything with it, but.
Well, that goes back to even like front page, right? That front page, or sorry, not front page, SharePoint Designer, right? It's the same trap that someone's going to fall for. Oh, I read somewhere on the internet that SharePoint Designer 2010 can be installed with my SharePoint Farm 2013, and they're going to be like, hey, SharePoint's down. What happened? I didn't do anything. But you did.
Yeah, or, our iTunes server is down. Well, that's because the SharePoint server is down. How many production SharePoint servers have you found iTunes installed on? 2?
Twice.
Serious.
Right? It was smaller customers, and they're like, well, we needed to share iTunes, and the box that we put SharePoint on for the company also happens to be the strongest box. We thought, what the hell? That makes the most sense.
Right. Everybody loves MP3s.
I'm not exaggerating. I'm not kidding. They literally would go into, the server room, the big old Dell, blah, blah, blah.
Pulsating lights.
Plug in their iPhone so they could download, and share the same set of music. This is not exaggeration. I'm not kidding.
This is not a parable. This is
the most truthful story I've told. Twice I found companies.
Yep. Yeah. So somebody in the chat room, Matthew, is saying, were they at least listening to your podcasts on the MP3s? I think this was before I did my Netcast, wasn't it? One of them was.
The first one was, yeah. So the first people, right? Just to show you how smart they were. It was a startup company that was doing some e-ink type of stuff, and they had. Over the course of 3 months, it went from 1 server to 13 servers, but they didn't believe in IT or investments, and they're like, well, things like Active Directory will just slow us down. So they had 13 separate servers, all running as in their own little work groups. They had to 13 different usernames and passwords. And it was some poor intern's job to change it on all 13 machines every
Because that didn't slow everybody down at all.
No, they were smarter. That is AD stuff that we've been preaching for years. That's a waste of time.
It's using one password for everybody in the entire company, so it's just nice and easy.
That would have been, that was not a bad idea. Just use the same password for everybody.
And they had iTunes, so that's all that mattered.
On their SharePoint server.
Yep.
That's so yeah. Don't install that kind of stuff. And again, it's a VM, so it was no big deal. But just good to know, because in all seriousness, SharePoint Designer, you bring that up. There are a couple of things inside of SharePoint that are easy to do inside of SharePoint Designer. And so I have seen a couple of production servers that have the appropriate version of SharePoint Designer installed on them for some of the management things, and especially SharePoint Designer 2013. What without the design part anymore? I mean, it really is just an admin tool now. So that could happen, but just, I guess, make sure your versions match up.
Don't mix match versions.
Or even try to say mix match versions. Damn it.
You can't cuss in the show, right?
Yeah, there's no swearing. So speaking of patches, this came out last week. The SharePoint 2013 Workflow Management Server.
Is this the part where I put in...
Do your bit, yep.
Yes.
You knock it out of the park.
Okay, don't tell them.
All right. So the SharePoint 2013 Workflow Manager got a patch, a cumulative update last week. So you guys all know that the bestest place on the internet to find out about SharePoint patches is my blog, right? Right?
Yes.
So the patch came out, so I immediately downloaded it and installed it and tried to figure out, because I didn't have the Workflow Manager or all that stuff on my SharePoint 2013 build list. So I was trying to get all the numbers and all that kind of stuff. And what I found out was internally the numbers don't match. And I don't have the numbers in front of me. I forgot. Crap, I got it.
So it's this number right here.
Yeah. So, and what's the other number? So that's the patch one.
Oh, goodness, 2 something.
So the Workflow Manager is version 1. And if you go out to the pages, and that's Service Bus there, it's Workflow Manager V1. But when I cracked it open and was looking through logs, the build number was all 2.02. whatever. I'm like, well, that's not ridiculous. Windows 7's build number was 6 something. Okay, I can understand that. But as him and I are talking back and forth, we found that one of the build numbers, the RTM, was bigger than the one in the patch. So what it looks like is, and I haven't got a chance to look at it all, but all the Service Bus version numbers are 1.0 something, but all the Workflow Manager servers are 2.0 something. But but the part at the end is the same. So you can see on that patch there, the service bus patches to 1.0.30207. The workflow manager patches to 2.0.302. It's the same numbers, but one's 1 and one's 2. And when you run the patch, as you're walking through the log file, you can see patch to 2 dot, patch to 2 dot, patch to 1 dot, patch to 2 dot. So before I end up putting that on my page, I'm going to need to figure out exactly what's what version, because it's incredibly confusing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's no PowerShell involved to get the version of the builds. So we ended up pulling like DLL versions off the file system to figure it out.
It was, and then I ended up going through installing all the patches and then looking at the log files and seeing what versions. And it was, 2.2.1.1.2.1. It was insane. So two morals of that: if you're using the workflow manager, install that and install the service bus patch first, and then the workflow manager patch. And then the second part is I will update my list at some point to get those out there.
Yeah, and the service bus manager did require a reboot for our testing.
Yes.
The workflow manager did not. But my farm, the workflow manager actually required me to install it twice. I did it the first time and it failed. I have a general rule: if a Windows patch fails, what do? I just try and install it again.
Yep. So
I waited 5 minutes, tried it again, and it was successful. So.
Yep. And the other thing about that is, now we've been installing the workflow manager on all of our SharePoint boxes, at least our small environments. There's a client portion also. So if you've got SharePoint servers that aren't running the workflow server, they have the workflow client installed, whether you remember installing it or not. You have to run these patches on that as well. So that's part of the piece. So again, once I get all the numbers figured out, had this book monkey on my back and prep for this. So now that I've got some breathing room, I'll put this out there. But put that patch. So before we go on to the shameless self-promotion, did you have any other stuff you wanted to talk about?
No, I didn't know. Did we want to pop an audience
question? I was
question
going to
or
say,
two?
anybody in the audience here have any questions about anything? 2013, 2010, why I still hang out with Shane? Go ahead.
User profile in 2013, has it changed?
Good question. So his question was, the user profile service in SharePoint 2013, has it changed? Sadly, not really. There was exactly one change that I know of, and they brought back the SharePoint 2007 import type. So did you use SharePoint 2007 at all?
Yeah.
Okay. So SharePoint 2007, the user profile service was awesome. You clicked like 3 things, you hit next a couple of times, and it was done.
And it just worked.
And it was fast, and you could use LDAP query strings. It was awesome. And then SharePoint 2010 came around and got all complicated and bloated and slow and horrible. In 2013, everything's all still FIM, and you got to do all the same fights to get the profile sync running. But you now have this AD sync option where it does 2007 style imports. So they're fast. And last week, I think, I talked about Spence Harbar has a blog post that talks about that. So go to my blog, and I think it's going to be 147 or 146. Has a link to a blog post that explains that particular change and how much faster it is and all that. Other than that, it's all exactly the same. The central admin page looks the same. It uses FIM in the background. The farm account still needs to be a local admin. I was glad to see that all of our list of grievances, they took that all to heart and then completely ignored them.
But they listened.
They did.
They
Yes,
listened.
they
Like my
listened.
therapist, $250 an hour. They listened.
Money well spent.
Yes.
So not a lot of changes with the user profile service. Yep. Anybody else? Any other questions in the audience? Can't stump this guy. Can't be done. Anything else? All right. So a bunch of those folks were at our session this morning, and that's why. Good. Chris, if you don't know the answer, I don't know the answer.
High availability farm for Azure Workflow Manager. Why does it need 3 nodes?
Good question. So what Chris is talking about is, so the SharePoint Workflow Manager, also called Azure Workflow Manager, depending on preview or whatever, has a high availability mode. I didn't think it required 3 servers.
It does. It's
it
either
requires
1 or
3
3.
servers.
That's the.
You can't have 2. I don't know if it's one of those things, like if it's a quorum thing where the 3rd server breaks the tie if one goes down. I assume that's what it is.
That's probably a watcher node.
Yeah. So something like that. And that's something. Did we talk about it, or is it the Office web apps? One of these has come up with how do you set high availability and all that.
I don't remember talking about either one, honestly.
Yeah, so I'm not sure why it requires that, but my guess is it's a quorum thing, breaking the tie.
Yeah, Chris is absolutely right, and I've read it before. I just don't remember at the moment.
Yeah.
Victor Willink has a good post he just came out with too, describing how you can use scopes. and you configure it.
So that was the one, yeah. So yeah, and I did talk about that one, about being able to use one workflow manager server for multiple SharePoint farms. You got to go in and tweak that scope bit. So that's good. So other than that, I don't know. And for those of you that don't know, this was Chris Beckett. He's an MCM. Again, if Chris doesn't know the answer, I don't have the answer.
So I've read this guidance too. They don't say why. They don't say why. They say you need 3 servers, and they don't. I haven't seen anything to describe really why. So until someone I know and trust, like you guys, actually gives this a try and writes something about it.
Yeah. So I'd have to look into that. Any other questions? Absolutely. You can go for a second one.
In your book, are you guys going into the managed metadata service for IT pros?
So our whole book, the audience for our book is IT pros.
So what would you want us to go? I guess what are you getting after?
For instance, if a developer, if they come and say enable this feature, as an IT pro, do I have to, like, what should I, like, just enable it, or do I need to?
So in the install chapter of the book, I walk you through how to configure the managed metadata service application, but that's about it. I don't go.
The pros and cons.
Yeah, I don't really go super deep there. Now, so the managed metadata service application hasn't changed a lot since 2010. It's revved, and there's new functionality and stuff there, but the core guts are the same. And in the 2010 version of the book, we actually did it had its own chapter. So that actually might be a better answer for you, is to go back, grab the 2010 book if you want to kind of get a better understanding of what the managed metadata service app could do from an IT pro perspective.
Yeah.
That's where we went deep in it. We didn't repeat the deepness in the 2013 book.
Now, the other thing that we will say is, you're wise in your reluctance. Just because a developer comes and tells you you should do something, for God's, if they tell you to run left, you should run right, just out of instinct. But for this particular one, the managed metadata service, I think every farm should have it. I mean, read the chapter, understand what it does. But things like search leverage it, use a profile service leverages it. So, install it, understand how to scale it. But yeah, I would install it, regardless of the fact that a developer suggested it. It's still not a bad idea.
Yeah. We definitely, as a default, every farm gets it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not high impact or anything. It doesn't. Yep. Hit one more. Yep.
We use DPM for our SharePoint 2007.
Okay, use DPM.
And for 2013, what do you guys have any recommendations, or?
So what are our recommendations for backing up SharePoint? So I'll be honest, I haven't used DPM a lot. From what I've heard about DPM, it works, but it's a monster. I mean, it's tough to manage and it takes a lot of resources. But at the end of the day, if it gets you your stuff back, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I will tell you that myself, depending on the type of environment, when I start having these kind of conversations, the very first step is good SQL backups. And unless that's happening, I don't talk about anything else. Everything in SharePoint, unless you're using RBS, is in SQL, and that is the cornerstone of good SharePoint backups. And then if they've got that down, then we'll start talking about other things. We'll say, what are your requirements? Are you using any third-party properties or products like AvePoint? If so, look at AvePoint's backup software, because then their stuff's going to bolt together better. I don't have anything bad to say about DPM, but I just haven't used it enough to say anything good about it. Is it working for you? Kind of. What don't you like about it?
It's just one day it works, the other day it doesn't.
So sometimes you can get stuff back, sometimes you can't.
You're using AvePoint as a second tier.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the answer that Todd and I always like to give, right, is if you come to me and your entire farm is a flaming pile of melted plastic and metal, right? If you hand me valid SQL Server backups of your databases, 100% of the time, I'm going to recover all your data. If you hand me anything else, DPM backups, AvePoint backups, a note from your mom, it's not going to matter. We might be able to get it back, but I'm not positive. But if you hand me valid backups from SQL, I know your data's coming back.
100% of the time, every time.
Yes. And as a guy who used to be, sit at my desk 8 hours a day, just a SharePoint administrator doing my thing, whatever. But I always looked at backups as there was 2 different sets of things to back up. One was, what is the stuff that's going to get me fired? So whether or not I can recover the CEO spreadsheet and his vacation pictures in his My Site, that decides whether or not I have a job, right? All the other stuff that we worry about backing up determines whether or not I spend 2 hours recovering or if I have to sleep snuggled up next to the server because I passed out in the middle of the night, right? I've literally woke up next to a Lotus Notes server like this because I'd passed out working on it for so long. But that stuff doesn't matter. No one cares how long it takes me to recover. Well, I mean, they do to a point, but they don't care that I stayed up all night. But valid data backups, that's the thing that keeps me having a job.
Yeah. And so I look at it a little differently. I look at least for SharePoint, there are two types of things to back up. The stuff that anybody else did and the stuff that I had to do. So it really comes down between content and configuration.
Yep.
And all of the data, all the content is in the content databases. And so if everything bursts into flames, like Shane said, if it takes me 2 days to rebuild it and configure it, that's cool. As long as the content's all there when you get back.
Yeah.
So.
Cool.
All right. Let's move on to the promotion part. So the first thing I had my promotion notes. It's funny that last week when I was talking about the shameless self-promotion, people were talking about how much better it was because it was shameless self-promotion as well.
Oh, but now I'm here.
Except this week it's not shameless. So Shane's here. So the first thing I was going to talk about was the book. I knocked out an awesome chapter. We're giving away some King-Code copies of chapter 15. No, it's awesome. I'm glad we have something. I was surprised that they had anything.
I signed that one even.
Yeah, and that'll go back to Mr. Beckett there. So everything's good to go. I've turned to my chapters, doing author reviews right now. It's all good. The next thing in my self-promotion was that I'm going to be at SPTechCon this week. Oh. So here I am at SPTechCon. So another thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is kind of a geeky deal. Some of you guys might appreciate it. Up the road from here is a little town called Petaluma, and a guy named Leo Laporte does a bunch of netcasts from there. He was on Tech TV. He's been around for 100 years. I'm going up there on Thursday. I was originally just going to be in the audience, but it looks like I might end up on Windows Weekly this week. So I know the other host, Paul Thurrott, and so I may end up on camera. So if you guys watch any Leo Laporte stuff, that's going to be Windows Weekly Thursday, 11 Pacific. It's 1 o'clock Central where I'm normally at. You can watch it live. You can go to twit.tv and watch the live feed, or you can download it that afternoon or the next day. So I'm kind of excited about that. That'll be kind of cool. The reason that that's cool is because he's kind of the godfather of all of this. This whole setup wouldn't be if it hadn't been for the stuff he does. We'd all be enjoying steaks right now or doing whatever.
I'm a little hungry, I'm not going to lie.
But so that's kind of cool. He was one of the guys that gave me the idea to do this. So the fact that I'm going to get to go see him and see his setup. He built a whole studio for his stuff. He does a bunch, like 20-some shows a week. He built a whole, the brick twit house, he calls it. But it's got a big studio and all that, so I'm really anxious to see all that, but it looks like I might actually sit in on the show, so that'll be cool. So I'm excited about that.
Don't screw up.
I will absolutely screw up and embarrass myself horribly. That can't not happen. So the next thing that this joker and I are doing is Tech Ed. Yeah, so we got to start working on that. So Tech Ed is in New Orleans, June 3rd or something, the first week of June in New Orleans for North America. I don't know if we know what sessions we're going to be doing, but we will be doing a pre-con. So that's the Sunday or whatever before. That's the story.
I keep forgetting about this thing, so I'm being reminded as you guys are...
So I don't know if any of you guys are going to Tech Ed. It's Microsoft's big thing in the year. Some of you guys. So we'll be doing that. And then I will be going solo to Madrid, Spain, and doing Tech Ed Europe. Shane doesn't like to travel outside the country. He's afraid of foreigners.
Especially Canadians.
Oh, they're the worst. They're absolutely the worst. So that'll be cool. And I don't know if we know of any other speaking things going on. Any of the
Probably the Boston of this, right?
Yeah, so they have they announced the Boston? Mm-hmm. So there'll be a Boston SPTechCon later this year. August. So they've announced the dates. Okay, so it's August 11th through the 14th, I think, Sunday through. So I assume that they'll let us back. How many of these have we done now?
All of them.
We've done all of the SPTechCons. Do we know how many there have been? Because the first one is, so this is what, 7? 9. Okay. So I think it's 9 because I think the first one was in Boston. So yeah, so we've been doing them for. Was it? Okay, so then.
Burlingame. Yeah, that was, yeah.
So we've done every one of these, and that's why Dave was such a great guy about helping us get this set up, because
They can't get rid of us.
They can't. So, but that is it. So thanks a bunch of the in-person audience. This was awesome. I appreciate this. Normally, so for those of you that are recording, normally this is done Monday at 8:30 Central. And you can go to toddclint.com/netcast to get the live feed and all that. You can go to youtube.com/toddclintnetcast and watch them with the recordings once they come up. You can get the RSS feeds, video, all that kind of stuff. So,
Very cool.
all right. Well, thanks everybody. Let's go out and get something to eat. Shane's buying, and I'll see you guys. See you all next week, same time.
Hi, Mom.